go do that, like explain why you don't need solvency or something like that. And again, like studies, like first, I like them because I like them as a debater, which is dumb, but it might affect my judgment.
Just one quick question for you guys. Are you cool with like dense fill, like complicated frameworks?
I'm fine.
What's dense fill?
Like something you'll have to think about.
Okay.
I like thinking, but again, like, as long as your arguments link back to your framework.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why is your framework there?
Yeah.
Okay. If you make me
It's gonna
think,
run
but you don't
11
have the links, I might say.
Lebanon, it's gonna make no sense.
Wait, no, that's
No. Yeah, that's Wilkinson's.
Lebanon.
0 cents. I promise you it makes 0 sense.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's supposed to be fun.
Watch, it's gonna make no sense. I don't even know.
I will try.
So it's just like to confuse me.
Let me just sorry.
Go ahead. Is it running? Oh shit.
Is everyone ready? 6 minute one, see, is everyone ready? Ethical subjectivity emerges out of impersonal bare being when an I responds to the other's call. Nealon 95. If one is to be an ethical subject, one must escape the anonymous rumbling of solipsistic materiality. Out of there is of anonymous being, there must arise a here I am. Subjectivity is torn away from impersonal being by responding to the other that is not reducible to a rule-governed code. The ethical subject is responding to a site-specific event. It is subjection to the face-to-face encounter with the other. The movement of subjectivity does not go from me to the other, but from the other to me. Here I am can only be said in response to others to an appeal. So subjection to the other unmakes any chance for the subject to remain alienated or free. The subject is inseparable from this appeal which cannot be declined. Thus, the other interrupts the ego's enjoyment and makes it an ethical subject by calling into question the ego's notion of itself as an I. Leotard. The violence of the revelation is the ego's expulsion from the address or instance of enjoyment. It is a scandal of an I displaced onto the you instance. By turning the I to its you, the other turns the I into his or her hostage. So contrary to Western ethics, the subject is fundamentally heteronomous and not autonomous. And my recognition of the other's vulnerability poses a pre-reflective ethical dilemma. I recognize my ability to do violence to the other, but because I am free-willed, I recognize the possibility of forming a goodwill towards the other. Regret. The confrontation with the appeal of the naked and vulnerable face awakens in the subject the goodwill as discomfort with the effort of existing. Left to itself, that effort is brutal and leaves everything behind in its own wake. There is a natural impulse in the subject to think and act from the subject from its own interest, but it is because it can be marked by an internal scruple or reserve that the subject is ethical, and by this it exceeds being. Through the internal scruple, a choice is put between self-interest and the other, by which it exceeds itself as involvement with the good, and thus goodwill. The paradox of being human is that we are not abandoned to our nature as natural impulse, but through the scruple we can arise above ourselves for unselfishness. Thus, ethics is the pre-reasoning foundations of human experience and is grounded in the infinite responsibility to the other. And ethical systems based on finite codified laws are nonsensical. Only indebting myself to the other is ethical. Derrida. If responsibility was not infinite, if every ethical or political decision with regard to the other was not infinite, then I would not be able to engage myself in the infinite debt with regard to each singularity. If responsibility was not infinite, you could not have moral and political problems. There are only moral and political problems from the moment when responsibility is not limitable. And conceiving of subjectivity as revolving around the self is ridiculous. Subjectivity is only possible through my awareness of alterity. My existence is not only created and justified by the other, but the actualization of my identity is only possible through my interaction with the other. Wood 06. What I must account for is not really thinking of my I as an individual, but finding myself as an individual, as a determined object. This is possible only through my experience as the object of the activity constituting my individual I, and this experience is possible only through the instantiation in my consciousness of a distinctive concept. This requires an origin in a rational being other than myself. Here I have to be aware of not activity in which I have already engaged, as possible activity in which I might engage. My individuality consists not in facts that distinguish me from others, but in possibilities of acting through which I determine who I am. The awareness of my individuality must be fundamentally normative. This is so even if fundamental norms of rational agency are objective or universally binding as my unique perspective. Thus, Fichte connects the concept of my individual I with the concept of determined ends. From the plural possibilities of what I might be to the free decision that determines who I am. That requires the existence of another rational being as its explanation. It will be the agency between determinable and determinate. Others are transcendentally necessary to the self. Next. Consumerism has co-opted schools and forced youth students into universal ontological category. We must use 11 of Austin ethics to reclaim our relation to the other. Todd. Levinas makes this link clear, as public schools encourage those under their influence to view other human beings and themselves as objects to be consumed, economized, and commercially transacted. Violence will also increase. Violence is the denial of otherness required for commodification. Violence is the difficulty of entering into an ethical relation with the other. Children as drivers of consumption internalize the evaluation of the worth of others. I see my classmates as subsumed under a universal ontological category. The negation of otherness is a circuit around ethical relationships. In order to address this, we must make schools places of ethical relationship where the encounter between self and other organically evolves and develops. As students in the school, we have the obligation to reorient ourselves to radical alterity. It is constitutive of debate as an activity to recognize the other. Therefore, the standard is to assume unconditional responsibility towards the other. Or to put it more simply, we need to avoid constructing a fiction in which we define another identity based upon our constructed view of them. Finally, since deducing moral principles from other moral principles is infinitely regressive, prefer 11 Abbasian accounts that acknowledges morality is non-deducible and treats ethics as first philosophy. Ethics is not grounded in a totalizing rule-bound code, but emerges prior reasoning with a pre-reflective egoistic self encounters radical alterity. Part 2 is the offense. I contend that democracy is the form of government most compatible with the AC ethic and therefore ought to be promoted. The introduction of democracy is an anarchic destruction in the place of passive governments. The disruption of the idyllic through democratization forces the voice of the other to be heard. Critchlow 4. Levinas is an anarchic metapolitical disturbance of the anti-political order. Politics consists in the manifestation of a multiplicity that is the people. The people cannot be identified and policed by territorialism in turn. If the act of the government risks the ideal consensus, then politics consists in the manifestation of a dissensus that disturbs the order by which governments wish to depoliticize society. Understood as the anarchic demos. Democracy is not a fixed political form of society, rather the deformation of the society from itself through the act of political manifestation. Democracy as democratization consists in the manifestation of dissensus, in demonstration, in Damascus, in Cairo, in Baghdad, manifesting the presence of those who do not count. It is a cultivation of the essential emancipatory practice. Democratic politics are the most compatible with the unconditional hospitality that Levinas demands. We must include the other in society with ultimate respect. Todd 3 writes, political institutions ought to begin from the position of hospitable respect. The one respected is one who renders justice. In democratic politics, unconditional hospitality merely happens. Erupting into the field of political experience, Derrida gives us the relation between hospitality and democracy, between unconditional and conditional hospitality. In the sphere of politics, conditional hospitality is necessarily parsimonious. In conditional hospitality, the welcoming of the others contained within a certain parameters of acceptability, as if hegemony watches over our invitation. Democratic politics is not merely a content respect, but a hospitality in which respect for the other has the potential to emerge and transform our existing relations to hostility. Ethics of democracy contain this trace of incorruption upon which the premise of democratization rests. And I have 30 seconds left. Essentially the thesis of the AC is that I don't defend implementation. Insofar as I prove that the United States has an obligation to promote democracy, doesn't necessarily mean that I have to defend their actual implementation of that policy. I only prove that through Levinas, insofar as Levinas is true, the resolution is a true statement, i.e. The United States ought to promote democracy, not that I would defend the effects of such a policy. I'm ready for process.
Wait, so he's arguing that the resolution is an error. His resolution is... He's making a resolution about...
Of truth and false.
That's so stupid. There's no
Now, I understand that throughout your ethical framework, you're trying to promote a way to help reconcile the differences between the other and the self in order to allow for both to be able to peacefully coexist. Is that right?
I would think that's a misunderstanding of the Levinas framework, right?
Okay, one sentence. What does it mean?
Levinas means assuming ultimate respect towards the other.
Okay, so it's all about respect, a way to promote respect, right?
Right, but there's I don't want you to get a misconception wherein we're just looking to imagine our relation with the other, right? Levinas would say that insofar Levinas would say in the basis of Levinas, it says that my existence is fundamentally originates from the other, i.e. I don't become an ethical subject until I interact with another or another person.
How do
right?
I respect the other?
What do you mean?
What actions do I do to show I am demonstrating respect to the other? Is it I kowtow in front of someone, or is it me punching him in the face? What determines respect for the other?
I don't know what kowtow means, but...
To bow in front of him.
Okay. Well, not necessarily that. Obviously, punching someone in the face would...
Why is that obviously not so?
If you punch someone, you don't respect them.
Why? I'm asking you why underneath your framework, which you seem to be able to deeply analyze the entire thing, why is it that punching someone isn't respecting that individual?
Because you're not holding them with ultimate respect.
You're saying they're not respecting them because they're not holding them to ultimate respect. What is the criteria that determines respect?
What would determine respect, i.e., would be opening your home to them, something like...
Why is that an action that is increasing hospitality? What determines that? Do you really justify
the term
what
hospitality?
Actions? Okay, so basically you're saying therefore that we have to do kind things for them. We don't want to harm them, right?
Sure.
Okay, so therefore we're looking towards a way to promote a means to benefit them as individuals and not physically harm them.
Yeah, but I'm not like, this is not like a collapse to Kant stuff.
Cool. So basically, you're saying that therefore we have to make sure that our actions are all demonstrating that respect, correct?
Sure.
And it's a demonstration of said respect, correct?
I guess so.
Okay, so therefore we have to be able to see that. For example, I can't just say, I want to invite you to my house, and then I shut the door in your face and leave you alone, right? I can't just do that. I have to actually open the door and let you in.
Well, I mean, if you're trying to get me to defend implementation, I would say that is like.
So I could just slam the door in your face and say I've respected you.
No, just like you're conflating like the way
I don't understand. Can you explain really simply, do I or do I not open the door for you to respect you?
You open the door, but like.
I do open the door. Okay, thank you. So now let's move on.
That's not true.
Now let's move on.
Like, that-
Why
that
is
does
it
not
that the
connect-
United
does not
States
connect
has that
with what
distinctive responsibility to be the one to carry this rope out?
Well, insofar as I've proven that democracy is like the form of government most compatible with the AC, it would follow that any government has the obligation to promote democracy.
Okay, alright. So therefore, you just have to once again see which one promotes the most amount of respect for the other. Is that right? And what if your action fosters more anti-other sentiments?
What does that mean?
For example, it makes me want to reject others even more. Like what you're saying makes me a raging racist, say. What would happen then? Should we do what you say?
Like, is racism unethical as per Levinas? Is that what you're asking?
Well, no,
Sure.
I'm just saying if it fosters that kind of negativity, is that something you would still defend?
If it fosters negativity,
Yes.
you'd have to like quantify what negativity is.
Okay,
Qualify
thank
what
you.
negativity is.
Alright, I'll start using practice. I'll be going NCAC. Alright, Jody's ready? Fun ready?
Yep.
Okay. Time starting now. I negate result. The United States ought to promote democracy in the Middle East. Observation 1, the affirmative side must defend a feasible form of implementation. Democracy promotion is defined by Eugene R. Witkoff as a strand of foreign policy adopted by governments and international organizations that seeks to support the spread of democracy as a political system around the world. This suggests that, therefore, it must be an implementable form. Democracy, according to Yale political philosopher Robert Dahl's definition, is a political regime that is highly inclusive and extensively open to public contestation. I value morality since the resolution says ought. The standard is upholding life. Justification 1. Government officials must use util. Waller states, all public policies entail some redistribution of economic or political resources such that one group's gains must come at another group's expense. Since policymakers cannot justify inherent value conflicts, and since public policy imply winners and losers, their duty requires them to demonstrate that the redistributive effects and value trade-offs implied by their policies are somehow to the overall advantage of society. Justification 2, life itself has intrinsic value. Rasmussen states, man's life must be the standard for judging moral value because this is the end towards which all goal-oriented action is directed. One cannot make a choice without implicitly choosing life for themselves as an end. Thus, upholding life comes first before achieving any other moral standard because maintaining life is the ultimate end goal of any moral action. Contention 1, democracy promotion disrespects the sovereignty of Middle Eastern countries. The United States has no right to promote its political system upon these weaker Middle Eastern countries. Such an action must be decided by the citizens of each independent nation, not the will of a larger, more powerful nation like the United States. Fisher says, democracy promotion compromises the complex series of initiatives by governmental organizations by influencing political, economic, and social change in independent countries. Krasner adds, efforts by one state to influence domestic authority structures in another have been pervasive. States move to impose preference for domestic authority on others. Such periods have been characterized by high levels of ideological conflicts. powerful states have tried to create states that mirror their own institutional structures. At the end of the day, democracy promotion is simply another way of the West imposing its ideas upon Middle Eastern countries. By doing so, it inherently disrespects the ideological political border and weakens the sovereignty of these nations. This is important because state sovereignty is the most important factor in world peace. Rapkin states, sovereignty is a political boundary. Each independent state determines its domestic policy for itself, and none has the right to impose its domestic views on another. Constructing international law on the basis of respect for sovereignty is to limit occasions for war. We will not secure a peaceful world if outside forces think that they have the right to intervene in any country which is, quote unquote, badly or unfairly governed. It will generate risks of misunderstanding when we don't agree about the rules or standards for such intervention. Therefore, the affirmative violation of sovereignty causes global war and loss of life, violating my value criterion. Contention 2, promoting democracy promotes terrorism due to competition among different terrorist groups. Democratic competition empowers terrorists. Chenoweth states, terrorist groups are prevalent in democracies. The motivation for proliferation can be explained by intra-group dynamics, with terrorist groups competing with one another for limited agenda space within the democracy. A cross-national longitudinal analysis of 119 countries for the period 1975 to 1997 provides confirmation of democratic terrorism. Different terrorist groups compete for space on the public agenda. Because such competition results in the crowding effect, the groups then perceive a need to outdo one another for influence, resulting in an overall escalation of violence. Terrorists do not hate freedom, they seem to thrive on it and exploit it. Also, a study confirms this as well. Stoddard 09 states, in a study of 19 Middle Eastern countries utilizing data from 1972 to 2003, it was found that more liberal Middle Eastern political systems are more susceptible to the threat of terrorism than more dictatorial regimes. Also, terrorism links to nuke war. Gowit 16 states, the threat of ISIS obtaining radiological materials for dirty bombs is real. ISIS only needs 10 grams of radiological material to fashion a dirty bomb for a major city capable of rendering 10 square city blocks uninhabitable for years. Since ISIS came about, the risk of nuclear terrorism has increased. Instability caused by democracy triggers the increased terrorism and the risk of nuke war, thereby violating the value criterion of life. Contention 3, democracy promotion leads to increased sectarian violence. Subpoint A, competition and conflict between the Sunni and Shia run deep, and mistrust and hatred between the two groups have been accumulating throughout the many centuries. Democracy is impossible when there's no tolerance of religious freedom or respect for each other's existence. Vallely states the division between the two factions is old and deep. The rift between the two biggest Muslim factions go right back to the beginning. Major developments have triggered the escalation of tensions between Sunni and Shia. When the Arab Spring reached Syria in 2011, it began as a protest against the corruption, nepotism, and human rights abuses of the Assad government. But within 2 years, the armed uprising against the regime was transformed. Rebels motivated by political indignation slowly become outnumbered by rebel groups with extreme Islamist motivations. Full-blown civil war is the result. Now, Sunni and Shia are locked in conflict all across the Shia crescent. As each side steps up its activities, the other feels more threatened and hardens its response in turn. Subpoint B, rule by majority leads to a tyranny of the majority. Yale states democracies are vulnerable to two distinct forms of tyranny of the majority. The first is political or legal, operating through the formal procedures of majoritarian rule. The second type is moral or social tyranny, the majority exercises through customs and the power of public opinion. Make sure the minority opinions are never heard in the government, and where the majority oppresses the minority through social norms and opinions. By implementing a democracy in these nations, you're simply creating a shell around the problem. A democracy will not stop this religious clash. It doesn't promote respect. It doesn't ease thousands of years of oppression. A democracy simply gives the majority, whether it be Sunni or Shia, a more legitimate way to suppress the minority religion, allowing the rest of the world to simply bypass that as a humanitarian disaster, and allowing the suppression and civil war that is prompted by the minority either suffering or trying to resist the majority who's enforcing strict rules against them to rise up. And that's going to trigger massive civil war and loss of life, which directly violates the value criterion. Now let's look towards my opponent's framework. First and foremost, you have to understand that my opponent's value criterion is heavily based upon implementation alone. As he said, if we're looking towards a system about respect, you have to demonstrate said respect. You can't just simply open the door and say, I respect you, and then slam the door in my face. You have to be able to let me in, be a kind, gracious host. That is action and end results. He looks towards utilitarianism to be able to promote respect. And the ultimate way to promote respect is to be able to promote the one thing all individuals value for themselves, life. So therefore, we always have to defer towards utilitarianism in this round. He had to prove that by promoting democracy, he's able to have definitive ways of leading to a democracy that is somehow able to benefit people by protecting their rights to life better and be able to promote life as a whole. Now, let's look at what my opponent, and also, my opponent argues in his own case that violence is a bad thing, that we cannot look towards violence in the entire situation. And that is exactly what I'm trying to show. A violation of people's rights is a direct link towards violence, and therefore we cannot cause violence. That's another major link towards his own framework. So his entire thing kind of just defaults towards preserving and maximizing life, which is my framework. Now, let's look at what he says, right? He simply gives a bunch of reasons why democracy itself is good, but it doesn't show how that can actually be implemented. What I'm going through is to show you all the direct harms of trying to implement said democracy. If anything, although you might have the intention to respect them, we're looking at end results here, as he so quaintly said during the cross-examination as well. Therefore, we can't just simply slam the door shut in the face of the entire Middle East by trying to make things worse, promoting terrorism, causing a risk of nuke war, international war, as well as civil war, all of them leading to loss of life and thereby violating both of our joint our valid good terms.
Is there any?
Yep.
I straight up told you in the AC that I don't defend implementation, so how do I link into your second or third contention?
Simple. The logic in your own case defeats that idea that you don't defend
What does that
implementation. Well, let me explain it this way, right? We have to find some way to know we are respecting the other. Because
Okay,
remember,
okay,
hold on.
dude,
Let me explain my analysis.
No, you misunderstood my question. I don't
Let me-
care. I don't care about.
explain.
I don't care contextualized to my framework. I care about.
Oh, wait, hold
if
on,
I
hold
don't
on.
defend
Hold
implementation,
on.
do I link into your second or third contention?
Hold on a second. You're saying you don't care about whether or not you satisfy.
I don't know.
your framework,
I'm asking you a
but
question.
you don't want to-
I'm asking you a question. Abstract my framework. Abstract my framework. If I don't defend implementation, do I link into your second or third contention?
Do you link into my second or third?
You say I would increase terror by increase terrorism by promoting this democracy, as well you say I would increase sectarian violence by promoting this democracy. If I don't promote democracy, do I link into either of these arguments?
If you do not promote democracy,
If I don't defend the policy action of promoting democracy, do I link into either of these arguments?
no, because you're trying to push that.
Okay,
idea.
that's
Hold
fine.
on, hold
Alright,
on.
that's good.
You're trying to
Alright,
trigger an
so
action
let's
that
go-
will
let's go
promote
on
democracy
to-
through some
Alright,
abstract.
so
That's
let's
the
go
affirmative
on
position.
to the first contention, right? Alright, so you say I disrespect sovereignty. Or actually, no, let's go on to the framework.
Sure.
Underneath Waller, right? It seems pretty circular. You're saying that, like, what, policymakers need to look to trade-offs first.
Right, yeah, there's going to be inherent rights conflicts. For example, I might respect a criminal and I might respect a
Right,
victim.
you,
but that
yeah,
doesn't
you
mean
said
I'm just going to allow the criminal
you
to
said
get away
policymakers
scot-free.
couldn't justify inherent rights conflicts. As per the AC, we could justify those those inherent rights conflicts. So wouldn't that imply that this is like nonsensical?
Let me repeat my example. We can respect the criminal, we can respect the victim. But a policymaker understands he has to do something for the greater good. Therefore, he doesn't simply let
Why is
the
it
criminal
unique
go
to
off
the
scot-free.
policymaker? Ethics is like universal
Individuals
regardless
are
of
the
who it
said
is.
policymaker, i.e. all individuals. Let's put it that way, right? Policymakers, individuals making decisions, have to choose a way that benefits the greater good. They
That
simply
seems
cannot
incredibly
just-
circular to me. Like, where's the beginning warrant that says you need to look to like the trade-off first?
Okay,
If
so
I can justify a trade-off to you as per the AC framework, wouldn't that mean there's literally no warrant as to justify why this is true?
So you say in the AC framework, if you're allowed to disrespect certain groups for other groups' sake, then that's good? Sure, if you want to contradict yourself, by all means.
Okay, that's fine. Let's go on to your life as a directing argument. Alright, so
That's me.
yeah, alright, so you're saying
Sure.
you essentially like make like a collapse argument on the AC.
That's
like, I collapse to like promoting life
Yes.
first. Alright, so can you like explain the warrant in this?
Sure. So basically, you're saying we need to respect others, right? But how do we respect others? It's an acknowledgement of the other. If the other doesn't exist, I don't exist. Is that right? Am I
Sure.
following your framework so far?
Yes.
So therefore, if the other is killed by me, I cannot exist. Yes.
If the
According to your
other-
own framework.
If the other is killed by you, that would still be like an unethical action as per the AC. So like I don't understand how.
So you're
this
saying you can
is
kill other people.
No, I'm saying we can't, which is why we still uphold life.
There
I
you
don't
go.
understand
So
why this
therefore, you
collapse.
do agree with the idea of upholding life. But what I'm saying is that the ultimate purpose of respect is to uphold life. You demonstrate respect by upholding life. If your idea of
I
trying to
demonstrate
demonstrate
respect, not just in upholding life. Right?
True,
Like,
but that is the ultimate idea that you're trying to uphold.
that's fine.
Right? Let me try.
Oh, yeah, sorry. go Kermit debate, which you can fill in the NC. Then on to the NC contention level. Or the AC contention level. The big problem coming out of the 1NC is that he's doing very little weight analysis between the two primaries. First, going to the wall card. This is incredibly circular. There's no word. First of all, why we need to look to trade-offs. Look to trade-offs in the first place by justify an inherent rights value trade-off. Inherent rights value trade-off, i.e., per the AC frame, that's subject between any of the trade-offs. I.e., he's saying that policymakers need to look to trade-offs, i.e., which helps the majority first. But insofar as I can justify the inherent trade-off of not linking to the majority, that's sufficient to sever the link, any of the logical links coming off the wall card. Next, going to the life argument. This might work on a contest even definitely not all about. You can cross by Nilo 95. You can cross by Nilo 95 that says that you can cross by Nilo 95 that says ethical subject should be emerged out of the impersonal mere being, i.e. i.e. my interaction with the others. What comes first? i.e. it is the rights values that come from my interaction with the others. The act that actually carries the normative value. i.e. it's not the life itself. It is my interaction. i.e. my respecting of the other, which codifies and creates morality. As well, you can cross by 106. That's a damning concession. He literally didn't put any defense on any of the wars coming after 106. He what specifically talks about why, regardless of whether or not what time live it says that it says actualizing my identity as per the other necessitates the other. I didn't go out and create this computer. I bought this computer from someone else, which means that to actualize my identity of wanting to become a better debater, I had to depend on someone other than myself. That was 100% conceded. You always give me strength of on that analysis because he conceded that, which means that regardless of whether or not life is a prerequisite, the normative value comes from my actualization of my identity through the other. That's a big reason. That was 100% conceded. Don't let him make any new arguments as well. There's a lot of weighing analysis studied in the 1NC that he's conceded in the 1NC. Don't let him make any new arguments. Let's go on to the Dara argument. That was also 100% conceded. It says that ethics is the producing foundation of human experience and grounding the infinite responsibility of the other. Ethical systems based on finite codified laws are nonsensical. That is exactly what he talks about, i.e. the consistency with his value criteria that he talks about. That was weighing analysis I did in the last speech. It says that if the responsibility was not infinite and every ethical political decision with regard to the other was not infinite, then I would not be able to engage myself in an infinite depth with regard to each singularity. That's weighing analysis study in the last speech about why my framework always comes first before hey, let's go. As well you can go down as well on the life arguments as well. You can cross by Berggraf from the AC and extend it across the flow, contrary to Western ethics, these subjects are fundamentally heteronymous, non-autonomous, i.e. it's not my autonomous life that is it's not my autonomous life that comes from the values, i.e. it is the heteronymous collectivity of what we engage in, i.e. through the interactions with the other that ultimately matters, is the vulnerable face of the appeal from the other as well, and overview on the framework. You can still look to Todd. That was also 100% conceded. It says that consumerism has co-opted schools and forced students into universal ontological counters. We need to make schools and debate spaces specifically places where we can foster ethical relationships through Levinas. That was cold conceded. That's game over right there. Even if you don't buy any of the ethical arguments I'm talking about, it's still saying that constituted of your role as a debate teacher. You need to make schools an ethical. You need to combat consumerism in schools and make it an ethical place. Make it a place where you can have ethical relationships. That's an overview on the framework. It's always the reason you prefer mine, because even if you don't understand a lot of the esoteric stuff coming off the AC, it's still reason why it's constituted of your role as an educator to make these to combat these consumerism and fight these fight the categories that we've been placed into in schools as well. So overview on the entirety of the AC. I don't defend implementation of any of the stuff coming off the AC. I'll give a reason why that's okay, but that delinks me from the entirety of the NC is first the first, second, and third contention. The big reasons why my not implementing these policies doesn't link me to any of these whether that upholds the actual resolution is another question. Let's go on to that. First, there's a difference between my ethic and what is constituted of linking up those debate. If you want to make the policy effect, you go back to policy debate. My framework might say that we ought to, but that doesn't mean I have to defend the implementation of that actual law. This would imply that to actually affirm, I would have to go on and prove autocracy myself as well. This comes to actually uphold the resolution and link up those debate is just to prove an ethical standard. So you can extend the AC contention level, which talks about hospitality. That links back to the framework about respecting the other.
Cool. I'll use the name of my Oh yeah, I am. one, I'm just going to go down the framework, and then touch base on NC. Alright? And I'll do both. In fact, I'll do two of them. Alright then. Judges ready? Audience ready? I'll take that as a yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let us begin. First, let's talk about this quandary that my opponent throws up in his last speech about the whole fact that schools have to be educating people about ethical and normative relationships. What a wonderful thing. And I think I'm going to support that. You know what? I'm going to be an S values about it. And that's key, because we need to make sure that we're supporting an ethical framework that is true and is correct. Something that stands, and is something that can help influence the way that we act as moral individuals. Which means it has to make sense. So, let's go into his framework, and let's see the major concessions that are going on in his framework. There's a bunch of dropped arguments that my opponent makes, and these are all game over for him, essentially. Let's start off with the fact that he concedes the fact that in order to respect other individuals, we have to be able to have end states. He makes no arguments against that whatsoever in that previous speech, and that's going to be killer in this speech here. Because what it's going to show is the fact that end states do indeed matter. These end states matter so far as to justify we are indeed carrying out respect for the other, and that we indeed are upholding that idea of respect that is so crucial towards this value-based framework that he is looking towards. That concession is also based upon the idea that he looks not towards violence. He himself stated in his own framework that violence is a rejection of the other, and that is exactly what I'm saying. Violence is bad, which is why we should promote life, right? We promote life, therefore, on two bases. First and foremost, violence is bad, ergo life is good. Second, because we have to demonstrate we respect you, we have to ensure that we're able to have some way that they are, they're getting their ends looked towards, some way that they benefit. And since, as stated in Rasmussen, everything is based on life, all individuals act for life, although he makes a whole thing about how he doesn't necessarily need life in order to know he exists, what I'm saying here is that we need life to know that we respected the other individual. So therefore, if we allow someone to live, if we promote life for others, that shows we respect those other individuals as well. And that's going to be a key thing to understand in this round. In order to show respect, and in order to prevent us from mistreating the other, we have to promote life and ensure that people are still kept alive. Which is why this case is really easy to understand. Let's go towards the negative case first. First and foremost, he drops all of my contentions, which means go ahead and extend that. And let me explain the impacts real quick. Contention 1, go ahead and extend Krasner and Rapkin, which shows that by violating sovereignty, which he is doing, he is going to be automatically triggering an increase in international conflict, thereby costing us more lives through international war. Right violation of life right there. Number 1. Number 2, terrorism. Terrorism has two impacts. First, an increase in terrorism risks, as Stoddard and Chenoweth all demonstrate by promotion of democracy. And also, the Gazette card, which talks about nuclear war. And that all directly impacts into life, as we're seeing loss of life due to terror attacks and nuclear war. Third, look towards sectarian violence right there. We explain that both through Valele, which talks about the long-running violence going on in the region, and also Gale, which talks about how that violence can be perpetuated in that social order through civil war. And that shows a loss of life due to civil war and oppression of the minority. Also, disrespecting the other. Now, he says he doesn't need to implement. However, remember, we talked about before, the only way to demonstrate that we are actually looking towards this ethical theory is to see that the end results are indeed respect for the other. So therefore, if we are to look towards this value, if we are to be LD debaters and look towards values and morality and be faithful to them, we have to look towards end states as well. And that means we need implementation. No matter how he tries to dodge it, that point still sticks. And as long as we look towards his framework, which I have no problem with, we're going to have to look towards end states and implementation, so we can't dodge that. Let's look at what my opponent has on his case in terms of the benefits of implementation, or what his implementation will necessarily provide as a boon for life. Nothing. There's no links into life at all. He makes hypotheticals about being able to respect others. But remember, if we can't see that respect, we're essentially just slamming that door right back in the Middle East space. There is no respect there. My opponent does not demonstrate any respect for the Middle East at all, besides a bunch of wanton rhetoric that is completely empty and pointless given the circumstance of this value debate. So how does this round break down? It breaks down really simply. First and foremost, you, the judges, as he kindly pointed out, have the ethical responsibility to promote ethical understanding and education, which means we have to be faithful towards the virtue ethic itself and what it means and what it represents. Thereby, you have to vote for the individual that is actually supporting that in this debate. Second, we need to look towards implementation. The very ethics itself talks about the need for individuals to be respected, and the only way that respect can ever be demonstrated is by physical end results. End results, which under Rasmussen state is through life, because that is the only end result that everyone all understands and categorically appreciates. Therefore, we have to see which one is best respecting others by upholding life. Third, which side is actually upholding life? The negative shows that in the affirmative world, we see an increase in terrorism. We see an increase in international war. We see an increase in nuke war. We see an increase in civil war. These are all going to cost us more and more lives. And if anything, that seems like a huge slap in the face for someone who's saying he wants to defend ethics and respect other people. So I just don't think that the affirmative is at all upholding that framework. What does the affirmative say in defense? He says he doesn't care about the end results. He doesn't care about whether or not we're actually helping those individuals. He doesn't care if his words are wantonless and are costing lives out there, which means all he's saying is he doesn't respect them. The affirmative world is a world of disrespect. The negative gives us an alternative. It may not be utopia. It may not be the best possible humanity world out there because, gosh darn it, there's flaws in all of us. But at least it's respecting them by not making things worse. Therefore, judges, in order to honor the very virtuous ethics which he so blatantly describes unto you, please vote nay. Thank you.
Start on the framework debate, go on to the implementation debate, and then go on to the AC contention. Is everyone ready? My opponent can talk pretty all he wants, but if he's still dropping substantive points about why my framework comes first, I'm still winning the round. Let's go on to the life as a prerequisite argument. That's the only thing that he can. That's the only leg his framework has to stand on first. I made the argument in my last speech that it's not that life may be a physical prerequisite, but it's not a normative prerequisite. I.e., from 106, which he has consistently conceded in the round. I.e., he's put zero defense on it. It says that specifically it is my interaction with the other, not my life that is not my life that is important, but it's the interaction, i.e., the actualization of my identity, which is important. Which is where we derive normative importance as well. There's still a lot of stuff he's conceded. He tried to make new analysis on the Todd argument. This is all new in the two. You can drop it right there. But Todd is specific to the Levinas argument. It specifically talks about why Levinas needs to be reinstituted in debate into schools. That's a big reason why he can't link back into this. That's a functioning on a higher level. Even if you don't buy any of the arguments coming off the framework on my side, that's still a reason why you look to the AC before the NC. So how the round break? So like the only thing how the framework debate goes down is the only thing he has left to land on is left to stand on is the life of the prerequisite. Insofar as I've proven, which he's conceded, which he has conceded in his in the entirety of the debate, that the actualization of my identity is what is important, i.e., through my interactions with the other is where we derive normative value, then his framework falls completely. Let's go on to the implementation debate. He says that it would follow from my framework that I don't have to defend implementation. That's obviously true. That's what I'm trying to prove. Insofar as this is a Lincoln-Douglas debate, all I have to do to uphold the resolution is prove that we have a normative obligation to uphold the resolution, not that we actually have to go do it. This would imply that I would literally have to go into the Middle East and promote democracy myself. That's obviously not true. I have to prove the resolution a true statement, i.e., that the United States ought to do it, not that I would have to defend their actual implementation of that law. If you want to go do that, dude, go to policy debate. Seems like you would be great there. How that breaks down is I don't defend implementation, but I'm still still proving the resolution a true statement, i.e., I'm upholding my framework, which mandates that we promote democracy in all democracy in all places in a hypothetical manner, not through the actual implementation of their law. Which means that all of the extensions of his contention in his last speech were wasted breath. I don't link into any of them because I don't defend implementation, and we agreed on that in cross-sec. So he has absolutely no offense coming off the NC insofar as this is the AC I actually read. Which means once I have won the framework and his contentions fall, the only place you can possibly look for offense is the AC contention. That any risk of offense coming off the AC contention is sufficient for you to affirm, because I'm the only one with any offense. I'm the only one with any link back into the 11 framework. You can go to the AC offense. You can extend crucially 04. I have contended that democracy is the form of government most compatible with the AC. It is a disruption in the face of classic governments, i.e., we bring the other into society and give them a voice in democracy. That is the hospitality that they talk about. That links back into the ultimate respect for the other, because we are enveloping them into society and integrating them into our world. So how the next down is don't look to him just because he talks pretty. There's substantive reasons about why you prefer my framework that he's consistently seated. The weighing analysis that he conceded about in the 1 NC and in the 2 NR, which means that my framework comes first, that leaves me with the only one with contextual offense linking back into either framework, which means you have to affirm that.
No, they're not going to.
Yeah.
I was told not to.
Just do it anyways.
Yeah.
I think they disclose it.
So you can find
Okay.
But what's that philosophy?
No, this is really our.